And there were other columnists who would use anger, who would use insults. And that's terrific for them. But it wasn't me. And I think more than anything, I had to be authentic to who I am. And I wasn't necessarily that person who wanted to use my platform to put people down.
Welcome to Money Market, a Bank of Tampa podcast. We highlight the businesses, business expert advice, the local economy, and points of interest in the Tampa Bay market. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple, and wherever you find your favorite podcast. And make sure you like, follow, and subscribe, and share this episode with a friend or colleague. I am your host, Owen Lefebvre, the Pinellas County Market President for the Bank of Tampa, Tampa Bay's oldest and largest community bank. Today's guest is Ernest Hooper. I think of you as a local landmark. He currently is the Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for United Way Suncoast, but before that, he was a longtime beloved newspaper columnist and assistant sports editor for the Tampa Tribune and the Tampa Bay Times for a total of 27 years, 4 months, 23 days.
Yes,
I get that right?
counted.
You did count. You did count. I was shocked that I found that out there, and it did say yes in quotation marks. You counted. So maybe best known for Seen on a Bumper Sticker. I used to love reading those, as well as his famous catchphrase. That's all I'm saying.
That's all I'm saying.
So from the newsroom to the nonprofit world, his story is a masterclass in purposeful storytelling. So I'm honored to have the one and only Ernest Hooper. Welcome to Money Market.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Owen. And let me just start by saying, as I made that transition, you were one of the people who gave me words of encouragement, and I'll always appreciate that. So
I appreciate it. I
Yeah,
mean,
thank
you were a skilled guy, and I had no doubt that wherever you ended up, you would be successful. And I am appreciative of just being able to read everything that you put out in the community and just being a voice of the community for so many years. And you're still continuing to storytell, and we'll certainly get into that. But what I want to know is, where did the catchphrase come from? That's all I'm saying.
Very interesting. Not too far from this location.
Okay.
At Four Green Fields.
Yes.
Which was a
sad the original's gone. But
yeah, we journalists from both papers would hang out at Four Green Fields all the time. And I was there on one particular night making some impassioned argument about sports. And I put an exclamation point on that argument by saying, "That's all I'm saying."
At the end.
And my friend Scott Perks looked at me, and Owen, I saw the light bulb go off over his head. And he said, "You should end all your columns with 'that's all I'm saying.'" Like he abandoned the argument and just focused on that. And I took him up on it. And it turned out to work really well for me. And it became more than just a catchphrase. It was a tool I used in my writing. And to have that at the end of the column meant that I had to lead up to the end with my strongest points, an exclamation point, if you will. And so it helped shape my writing.
Well, I felt it was almost kind of the Andy Rooney ending for writing and as a columnist. It's like the end.
Yeah, and many columnists have had a catchphrase, something that they use at the end. Others haven't, but I just felt like it worked for me.
Oh, it definitely worked. So at that time, I mean, you had two main newspapers in town, the Tribune and Times.
Mhm.
And I know at some point in time the Times ended up purchasing the Tribune, so you blended. But was there a healthy competition between the two editors?
Yeah.
Or two
There
writers?
was a healthy competition, and the papers both covered Tampa Bay, but each paper had its own distinct character. And the Times was always, I think, the more serious journalistic institute. We're owned by the Poynter Institute.
Mhm.
And the Tribune was that underdog. And they embraced that role. They love being the underdog. They love beating us on stories and challenging us. And we had more resources at the Times. We had a larger staff, but they were great competitors. I had a lot of friends and colleagues there. I started my career there in 1988. And the day the Times purchased the Tribune, I had several people say, "So you're celebrating, right?" And I'm like, "Not really." It was not. It was something that I think had to happen.
Mhm.
I don't think the community could continue to support two papers, but for me, it was not a joyous day. I was sad for my colleagues at the Tribune, and people would always say, "Ernest, Who's the big winner between the Times and the Tribune? And I would always say the community. This community benefited from having 2 papers.
Hmm.
This community benefited from having, uh, journalists going against each other because we were both serving the readers and the community. And, when the Tribune went away, it was a loss for the community.
Well, I think also, I mean, it helped keep in retrospect now a little bit more honesty in the reporting, and I want to get into some commentary on that too. Um, I will say I do remember that because I was a Tribune subscriber
Mhm.
that I had noticed over the last few years. It was like every 6 months, every year, there was a reshuffle of everything, and the content just continued to shrink. And I know you were also the sports editor, and I think the sports got down to like one page. I mean, it was virtually
Right,
nothing.
right. Well, the business model for newspapers was broken by the internet, by social media, by progress.
Yeah.
And, it's been a challenge, um, for the Tampa Bay Times. It was a challenge for the Tribune. It was really a challenge for every newspaper in America to figure out how to recreate that business model to get it to work. And I still don't think anyone has perfected this new formula that they need to operate under to thrive and succeed. And, we get together now, my former colleagues, and we talk about, you know, what could have been different, what decisions could the Times have made that may have put it in a better position
Hmm.
today. But we always end up saying, well, what newspaper in America is really thriving?
Right.
What and it's the largest papers, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they're still thriving. But most newspapers, the size of the Times and the Tribune, are enduring the same kind of struggles that those papers went through. And it's a business model that stopped working.
How do you feel about it? So I guess I'll dig into that a little bit, pull that thread. How do you feel about the reporting? Because I used to, and I still do. Like I love to read an op-ed. I love to read a column,
Mhm.
but that's where you get someone's take on something. You get the opinion, whereas the rest of the paper, I just want the news.
Right.
And on those op-ed pieces, like I want to read both sides. I want both sides of the story. Give me an argument, and so I still love that piece. But it does drive me crazy. Everything is editorialized. You're reading a newspaper, and whoever or an article, and then whoever the writer is for that piece will include like, well, this was obviously fake, and it's like, well, hold on, you're
Yeah.
new. We don't know if it's fake or not.
Well, there's been great debate about how to shape stories. And I think every reporter brought, you know, everyone was saying, well, you're supposed to be unbiased.
Yeah, objective.
Yes. But as the debate grew about what is the truth, what is true, philosophically, journalists were being told the adage, this is the adage that they use. If it's raining outside and someone says it's not raining, you have to say it's raining outside. You have to go outside, make sure it's raining, and then come back and say, "Hey, that person said it's not raining, but it's raining." And that's what you're seeing in some of the reporting is a a goal of trying to help the reader understand what's true and what's not. And it's changed because there's such great debate about what is true.
Hmm.
And uh, social media has changed a lot of that. Um, the internet has changed a lot of that. And so journalists feel compelled, yes, to give you the facts, but to also weigh in a little bit. And it can be a slippery slope, but you want to weigh in a little bit and make sure the reader understands what's real and what's not.
Okay, I appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think, I think at one point it was just present the facts, let the reader figure out what's true.
Yes.
But I think generally speaking, journalists are no longer comfortable with that approach because there's so much misinformation in the blogosphere today.
See, I did like that approach because I'm like, okay, if I feel something is off here, or maybe the motive is misaligned, let me
Mhm.
do some additional research. I don't want to be spoon fed that like, hey, this is just give me facts,
Yeah.
kind of first principles.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to combat is a fear that people are being misinformed. They are being misled, and I think there are some journalists, particularly in traditional media, who want to reverse that trend, want to make people aware, and they're being challenged by those on both sides of the political spectrum. Hey, what you wrote is misleading. Tell the truth. And so it's I think this. I think I enjoyed, for the most part, a very halcyon time for journalism. And then I got kind of to the end of my career and I felt like I'd been walking down a yellow brick road. And then I get to the gates of the Emerald City and I look back and all of those yellow bricks have started to fade.
Mm.
And so what I try to do is continue to support the young journalists today. They don't enjoy the kind of support that I enjoyed. They don't have the tools necessarily that I had. They don't have the readership that I had, but they still have that hunger to be a journalist, to make a difference. And so I try to support them as much as I can. I subscribe to 5 different papers.
Hmm.
It's put a slight dent in my bank account, but it's just important to support journalism.
So would you be, if you were starting today, if you were a young Ernest Hooper, would you follow the same path today?
I think so. Owen, I started as a sports writer, and that was a job that allowed me to combine 2 things I truly love: sports and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what drew me in. I loved
That's like a dream job for so many
Yeah.
young men, boys.
Yeah, it was, and I remember I started out covering high school sports, and I was working first at the campus radio station, and then for the school newspaper, the Alligator, in Gainesville, University of Florida. Go Gators! Um, and that would require giving up Friday nights, and people would be like, "You're not going out tonight? You're going to some game?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Yeah, and I'm excited about it. Like that's where I wanna be. I wanna be at the game.
All
And
right. So you knew,
so
you found your
I
place.
did.
Yeah.
I did. You know the cliche, a man who finds his passion never works a day in his life. And that's what it was for me.
That's great.
So,
So how do you transition to being a columnist?
okay, Imma give you the short version of that story. It's one your wife has heard. It's one that probably 1,500 of my closest friends have heard more than once. But I'll tell you, I ended up covering the Bucks. I was the NFL writer for the Times, and in 2001, the Super Bowl was being played here in Tampa, and my whole goal that season was
Was
to
that Giants Ravens? What was that? Do you remember?
Yes, it
Okay.
was Giants Ravens.
Okay.
And my whole goal that season was to cover the Super Bowl and write the best story I'd ever written in my life. Because the entire sports writing world would wake up in Tampa Bay and read my story on Monday morning. And it was going to be so good that someone was going to hire me away from the Times. It was either going to be the Washington Post,
You're going national, right?
or the
right.
New York Times, Sports Illustrated. I just had the biggest of dreams, the best plan. And you know what they say, Owen, people plan, God laughs. So my father passed away the Thursday before the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So instead of staying here, I went home to help my mom prepare for the funeral. And my mom was like, "You can't come home. You got to stay and cover the Super Bowl." But it just, in a moment, all of those plans just went out the window.
Yeah,
it wasn't
of
important
course.
to me anymore. So at my father's funeral, 3 of my sports writing friends greeted me after the service. And the first thing they said to me, I thought they were going to say, "Hey, our condolences. So sorry for your loss." But the first thing they said to me was, "Hey, who's that girl over there? She's beautiful." And I was like, "Really? That's what y'all saying to me?" And so I look over and I say, "Oh, it's my old high school girlfriend." And they say without missing a beat, "No way. You could have never gone out with someone that beautiful."
So friends are for, right?
Yeah. On the day I'm burying my father. It's good to know that I have no juice. But, so I decide to prove to them that it is my old high school girlfriend. So, I stick out my chest, I pull it in my stomach, I get this big Kool-Aid smile on my face, and I go over and I have this very warm and animated conversation with her. And I thank her for coming. And she shares that she always loved my dad. And, anyone who's watching can tell that it's a great relationship that we once had. And so I go back over to my friends and they're like, "Yeah, we got new respect for you, man." I'm like, "You guys can just get in the car and go back to Tampa. Goodbye." So we get in the limo to go to the cemetery, and there's two limos, and the front limo that I'm in, it's me, my mom, my older brother, who's a bit of a jerk, and my wife. And my older brother says to my wife, "Hey, Florence, did you see Ernest talking to his old high school girlfriend?"
Oh,
Oh my goodness, it was incredible. He had his chest out, he had his stomach in, he
uh,
had this big Kool-Aid smile on his face. And I wanna tell him to stop on, but he, just keeps going, and I'm so shocked that he's saying this, I can't even get the word "stop" to come out of my mouth. And, finally, my mom kinda smacks him on the shoulder and says, "Cut it out." And we all laugh. And it's this moment of levity on the day we bury my
yeah,
father.
yeah.
And I just thank God my wife started laughing. So, um,
Yeah, that could have ended differently.
yes. So I come back to Tampa. I go into the office and there's a job posting for a columnist, and I decide to apply. And to apply, you have to write a sample column. And so I put together a column with different takes about life in Tampa Bay. I mentioned some restaurants that I enjoy, a couple of night spots. Of course, I had a wisecrack about Mons Venus because
It's Tampa.
every column about Tampa has to have a wisecrack about Mons Venus. And I put in a couple other things, some political observations. I submit the column and I get the job. And the editor says, Ernest, we had a lot of people apply for this position. We had a lot of people who wrote great sample columns, but there was something about your column that made it stand out of all the others. And I was like, oh, what was that? And he said, it was that anecdote about seeing your old high school girlfriend at your father's funeral. I love that. That's the kind of flavor we're looking for.
All right. So that
So,
personal touch, right?
yeah, so when someone says, "Why did you go from sports writing to being a columnist?" I always say, "Because my dad died Super Bowl week, and my old high school girlfriend came to his funeral."
At least you had the dad part in there,
Yeah,
not just because of my old high
yeah,
school. And your brother.
yeah, yeah. It was a confluence of a sequence of events.
So how did you feel your voice grew and changed over time after you were initially a columnist and then to the point in time you retired?
Yeah, no, I would say, in some ways, I'm still searching for my writing voice, and it's a never-ending journey, and it's a never-ending journey because everything that happens in your life changes your writing voice. What's happening in the world changes your writing
Yeah,
voice.
your experiences changes, yeah, your approach and
Yeah,
the way you're thinking
absolutely.
and yeah,
Yeah, becoming father to a daughter changed my
that's a life
writing
changer. Yeah.
voice. 9/11 changed my writing voice. I remember having to go out that day and walking aimlessly on the streets of Tampa, trying to figure out what to write,
Right.
trying to figure out how to process what had just happened. And just kind of ended up talking to some people, kind of man on the street, and getting their reaction. And I don't even know if what I wrote was good, but, I know I had a job to try to capture what the sentiment was in Tampa about that tragic day. That changed my writing voice. Everything that happens changes your writing voice, and that continues today with the communications work that I'm doing for United Way Suncoast. The more I learn about the community we're serving, the community members who are benefiting from our work, the more it helps shape and influence my voice.
Was there a pressure that you felt to be the voice of the community, like a 9/11 or, some other event that happened that people are going to look to you for some direction for your thoughts?
Absolutely. There's a pressure to stay relevant. That was the pressure for me.
Hmm.
I When I first got that job, um, I was writing weekly, and I wrote 4 columns in the first month, and then my cupboard was bare. I had said all the things that I wanted to say in life, and I was like, "Oh, what am I gonna write now?" And it took a while to kind of find my groove and to kind of find my place among all the voices. You know, back then, um, we had a whole parade of columnists who were all offering their observations um, about politics, about business, um, and so I had to kind of find my slot among all of those great voices.
Hmm. Is there a column you think that really stood out more than others and maybe changed the discourse in the community or drove some of the discourse?
Um, oh wow, that's a good question. Um, there probably were some, but I think the columns that resonated most with me, I did interject some political observations from time to time, not necessarily to try to influence outcomes, but to be a voice of reason. And anyone who read my column will tell you that, I lean left, but many times I tried to have that, for lack of a better term, that centrist voice, and to try to explain the opposing political perspectives with reason, not with anger. And there were other columnists who who would use anger, who would use insults, and um, that's terrific for them. But it wasn't me, and I think more than anything, I had to be authentic to who I am, and I wasn't necessarily that person who wanted to use my platform to put people down. Um, you know, I wrote that column for 18 years, so certainly you could go through and find where I challenge some folks, but I always tried to make it about policy and not who and not make it personal.
No personal attacks.
Yeah, well, not many, not many. I
All
might
right, fair.
hey, I might have slipped up once or twice.
Hey,
Full disclosure.
we are human. We're emotional, right? It
Yeah,
happens. It happens.
yeah, it does.
Um, is there a particular guest or person you interviewed that for your column that really kind of stands out? I mean, you've interviewed so many, especially in sports, but I mean within the community, but one that's really one of your favorites.
Yeah, I have a lot of favorites. Um, I'll tell you though, one of the things I discovered as a columnist is that it's so important to get out in the community and make connections with everyday people. And there was one particular evening when I was out in Ybor um, looking for a column idea, and I was really
So
struggling.
you weren't out there to party. You were
No,
out there.
no, I was looking for a column idea, and it was kinda early, in my career, and I had started getting out in the community and started, I had started going to, being a food judge just to make a connection with folks,
All right.
and I was going to different, food contests, and so I was out in
I
Ybor
like
one
that
night,
job.
and I really couldn't find anything to write about, and then I walked all the way, west on 7th, came back east, got down to the Columbia, hadn't really found anything, and then I looked into the bar at the Columbia, and I saw this couple sitting there, and it was very evident that they had just gotten married, and they were enjoying this very quiet moment after the reception that they had had at the Columbia, and it was very tender and touching, and I didn't really care, Owen, because I
You,
needed a
you ruined the
story.
moment.
So I did.
Good job,
And
Ernest.
I went up to him and I said, "Hey, I'm Ernest Hooper, and I'm out looking for a good story. And the two of you you look like you might have a great story to tell." And the guy looked at me and he kind of turned his head and he said, "I know you. You were a judge at the Maggiano's meatball contest."
So random.
And
And
because
I'm also a columnist.
yeah. But because he remembered me from that, he was willing to share a story, and it was a great story. They had that she lived in London, he lived over here. They met through Match.com and started this romance,
Wow.
just
International.
emailing each other. Yeah, and he proposed to her in Venice on a gondola, and then they ended up getting married in Tampa.
That's a great story. You
Yeah,
just stumbled upon.
yeah.
So he knew you from, you being a food judge. But what about people that, I mean, maybe don't know you, your process of developing rapport to get them to trust you and have honest conversations? Like, what's that process like?
Well, the key when you're interviewing someone is, first of all, to listen. I think so many people think, "But you gotta ask this question or you gotta ask that question." You do, obviously, but you also have to listen. And then when folks say things, you know, say something that indicates that you are listening. You may wanna throw in a little tidbit about yourself. "Oh, I too have experienced that," or I've gone through that with my kids." And that's how you kinda create that instant rapport.
Yeah,
And then
common link.
yeah. And I call them touch points. What you're trying to do is create that commonality so you can have those touch points. And once you do that, once you reveal a little of yourself, they're more willing to reveal more about who they are. And it may take a while for you to get them to really open up, but you just keep having that conversation. It's not even an interview, it's a conversation.
Hmm. What about AI? AI is changing the landscape. Who knows? I mean, there's this thing called the dead internet theory. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but eventually we get to the point that there's so much out there in the, I guess, the ether and all that's being done by bots and AI, and that none of it's real. So people just disconnect. But I think it has a real possibility of impacting journalism. I mean, just I scroll through social media, and LinkedIn seems to be, because it has all the bullet points. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, that's AI. I mean, how do you think it's going to change
Well, I think
newspapers?
I think it's going to have an impact. I would be naive to say it's not. One kind of common statement that I've been hearing from my friends in communications, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's the person who knows how to use
Mm.
AI who's going to take your job. And so you have to recognize it as a tool to create greater efficiency. But at the same time, you have to have some guardrails. You know, when AI produces something for you, you have to make sure you read over it and verify it. The Chicago Sun-Times had a really embarrassing article this summer. They asked a freelancer to put together a list of summer books, a summer reading list, and he got AI to do it. And I think 3 or 4 of the books weren't
They
real.
didn't exist, right?
Yeah, AI just made up the books. So you got trust but verify, as President Reagan used to say.
Wise words.
That's going to be the MO with AI. With dwindling staffs at in TV newsrooms, at newspapers, I think you're going to see more outlets rely on AI, but they'll have to trust but verify.
What about your best sports story?
My best sports story. I'll tell you this. People talk about, "Hey, Ernest, you've been in the locker room with the Lightning and the Bucks and the Rays." I've done all of that, and it's been great. And I've covered Super Bowls, and that's been great. But I started covering high school sports, and I have to tell you, one of the things that just warms my heart is to see a lot of the athletes I covered 20, 30 years ago thriving in our community now as entrepreneurs, as businessmen. And I'm good friends with Andrick Frazier. I don't know if you know Andrick. He's
Mm.
pretty successful here in Tampa Bay. And I first met Andrick when he was a star basketball player at Tampa Prep. And, I interview him after the game and write stories. And so I was over at his house one day, and his wife came up with this stick binder. And she said, "Hey, look at this." And I opened it up, and it was a scrapbook of stories that I had written about Andrick
That's
in,
amazing.
in
They kept them.
1997.
Yeah.
And she said, and don't you think he doesn't look at it at least once a week? So, to know that just crystallized how meaningful it was for me to cover high school sports.
Yes.
And I had to think there's probably a lot of scrapbooks out there that have my stories in it. And those athletes have probably never reached back out to me to say, "Hey, what you wrote about me gave me confidence." But a few of them have. And it just, I can't tell you how much that means to me.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I'm
heartwarming.
talking about CEOs, um, people who have served in the military have found me on Facebook and say, "Hey, Mr. Hooper, I still remember when you came out and wrote about our big win over Robinson or over Plant and things like that."
Humbling.
So
That's amazing.
it
Yeah.
is humbling. Very humbling.
You're always telling other people's stories. Is there a story about you that you wish more people told or knew?
A story about me that I wish more people knew. I think people know this, but um, what what drives me more than anything is being a father
Mm.
and a husband and family. And I always say that I serve the readers at the times, um, but I work for my family. And it was a labor of love. And all I wanted to do more than anything was be present in their lives, be there for their games, be there for their shining moments, be there for those moments where they were down and they needed someone to pick them up. And what I've discovered, my oldest will be 33 this year. My youngest is 23, and they're all adults. They all have jobs. Parenting never ends, Owen. I want you to know you're kind of in that college mode, and I know you're probably thinking, man, well, once they get out of college, my whole parenting thing will be up. No, it, it never ends. You will continue to be a parent forever. It'll change what you need to provide and the support you need to provide, but it never ends.
I'm hoping a little bit of it. So it's funny as they're evolving, and all of our kids are, um, they're just good kids. My youngest, who's also a good kid, but he thinks he knows everything in life.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping at some point in time I get to be a parent again, because right now,
Well, you know, they say the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until they turn 25. So you kind of got to wait until they're 25. And then hopefully, I think the light will go off and they'll look back and say, oh my goodness, I got this far because of my parents. You
and
know?
I joke, just as a guy and us, being that age too, that we don't actually become humans until we're 25. So I mean, we're just idiots.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there a local person in the community or a celebrity or someone you wish you could have interviewed that you didn't have an opportunity to?
Oh wow, that's a really good question. I think I got an opportunity to interview um, a lot of folks, but I'll tell you, there's a woman named Kay Andrews who owns the Florida Sentinel Bulletin.
Okay.
The Florida Sentinel Bulletin is um, uh, a newspaper that caters to the African American community here in Tampa Bay. It has existed uh, for probably 70, 80 years. I
Mm.
mean, it goes back to the 30s. In fact, um, Kay Andrews' grandfather was one of the leaders of uh, the community chest,
Mm.
the predecessor to United Way. He
Sure.
was one of the people who was out there in the community um, representing us and getting people to donate. And I've met Kay Andrews a couple of times. Um, I gave her my card. I said, I want to interview you. I think you have a fascinating story to tell. And I just never heard back from her. And she may see this podcast and say that, you know, uh, she would have granted that interview, but it just never came to fruition for me.
I will send it to her.
Yeah, yeah,
So
do
good.
that.
Hopefully we can make that happen for you. That'd be amazing. And if it's done in a public setting, like on a podcast or something, United Way podcast,
I would welcome that.
yeah, I want to sit in the back of
Yeah.
the room.
So, yeah, it's terrific though that we have that shared history, and one of the things that makes me swell with pride is that when the Tampa Welfare League and Community Chest started in 1924, uh, it did a terrific job of engaging all of our communities and being inclusive, and that's a history that we take pride in, and that's something we continue to do is to be inclusive at United Way.
So 100 years of history now, at United Way.
101.
Um, that's right. So how do you pivot your storytelling from, journalism to telling the story of the United Way Suncoast?
Yeah, I think as a columnist, particularly once I got established, I could, dare I say, be a little more long-winded. I could invite readers, "Hey, you know me, you know I'm gonna tell a good story. Come with me while I wind up before I deliver the pitch. Yeah, it might take me a minute to get might take me 5 or 6 paragraphs to get to the point, but I know you're gonna stick with me." In this writing for United Way, we gotta get to the point much quicker.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing I've learned from speaking to nonprofit leaders, to nonprofit communicators who've been in this business for a long time. When we talk about the mission of the United Way, we have to present the problem first. We have to talk about the fact that nearly 50% of households in our region
Mm.
are living below the Alice threshold, meaning they're living paycheck to paycheck and staying one unexpected expense away from dire circumstances. We start with those kind of statistics. Then we talk about what we're doing. Then we talk about how we're making an impact. But it's the problem that grabs the attention of our stakeholders and donors. And even those who have supported us for a long time need to be reminded that there are still people dealing with a lot of challenges in our community.
Well, you all cover so much. How do you decide which stories to amplify, bring attention to?
Well, yeah, when I started at United Way Suncoast, this is the running joke. I wanted to change our slogan to "We Do a Lot." Uh, they were like, "Oh no, I don't think that's going to work for us, Ernest." But it's
But you do a
true.
lot, yes.
It's true. We do a lot. We do a lot to elevate early learning and third grade literacy. We do a lot to energize middle school and high school students to put them on a path to post-secondary success. We do a lot to empower families through our financial security initiatives. And so we try to tell that story by emphasizing that our impact areas create an interconnected path. They're all related. They're not necessarily individual efforts. It's a concerted uh, effort to create a path for families to change the trajectory of their lives and give them, as we like to say, the freedom to rise,
I
the
love that. Yeah.
ability to create the life they imagine for themselves.
So, do you think there's one issue in the community that deserves to be amplified or get more attention than it does?
Well, I certainly think there's a range of issues, I think. Um, Certainly, I would like to see greater attention paid to early learning and some deeper solutions arise for that sector of our community.
I feel like that's getting the attention. I don't know about solutions, to your point, but
Right, we're moving in the right direction.
Mhm.
Um, but if you allow me to speak boldly,
Yeah, please.
I would love to see public school districts start to provide early learning uh, at at free or reduced costs, and that would be a lot for them to bite off. But um, there's such a challenge finding equitable childcare today, equitable and affordable.
Mhm.
And when we talk about it, I think folks have this vision of folks who who are below the Alice threshold, struggling to find quality childcare. But it's everyone, Owen. It's people who are very well off and have the funds to pay for childcare. They're struggling to find a place for their kids.
Yeah, I mean, we
So
have employees here at the bank that make
yes,
they make good money, and they're having a hard time either just finding it outright, availability,
right.
but then also it is incredibly expensive. And then you talk about that Alice and below 50%. I mean, it's virtually impossible.
Yeah, yeah. We one of the factoids we like to use is that the annual cost of childcare in Tampa Bay is more than the annual cost of tuition at the University of South Florida.
That's
And
crazy.
yeah,
That's
it
a
is,
crazy number.
and it's something we really need to see if we can address. We have some elected officials and some state legislators who recognize the issue and are trying to make a difference. In 2024, uh, there was a bill passed that provides tax credits for employers who give their employees tax credits or create available childcare on site.
Mhm.
Now, there haven't been that many employers take advantage of that because it's a big, you know,
It's a big, yeah. I feel like
yeah,
a couple of hospitals maybe, but I mean,
yeah,
it's
but
not
it's a
not
big
many.
thing to
Yep.
take on.
Yep.
But hey, incremental change is what we talk a lot about
Mhm.
at United Way Suncoast. You're not going to fix any of these issues all at once. You're going to have to take it incrementally.
No, yeah, as long as you're making progress.
Yeah.
So
So I would say early learning is one that really stokes my passion. I think affordable housing is another one, and you know the challenges that this region has endured since the pandemic.
Mhm.
Now the market's changing a little bit, and it's becoming more of a buyer's market. Um, but there's still
Not enough.
it's still difficulties for people who want to become, particularly those who are looking to be first-time home buyers.
Well, I mean,
They're
first-time
finding
home
it
buyers in the
challenging.
300,000 range. I mean, it's just
Yes,
I mean, how drastically things changed after COVID, but even going back 10 or 15 years after the great financial crisis. I mean,
right.
just to see that, yeah, I mean, people are being priced out in the current interest rate environment is not helping that at all.
Well, and it has to be an issue that galvanizes our leaders because places like Hillsborough and Pinellas, um, the migration has reversed. People are leaving
Mhm.
now to find places where they can get more affordable housing. I think it's a real problem in Pinellas where um, you've seen a number of residents shift to Manatee
Mhm.
County to Pasco County. And because we don't have great public transit, sooner or later, the businesses that depend on those everyday blue collar workers to come in are going to face some challenges because those workers are going to be moving further and further away, and it's going to be more difficult for them to drive in to handle those jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
The beaches really struggle with that,
yes.
because it's so expensive to live on the beach. So, I mean, all the service workers,
Right.
they don't have parking. They can't live there.
Hmm.
So that is a challenge.
Yeah, and I think public transit is an answer. I think, um, I have a friend who's still in journalism. Bob Putnam was writing a story about West St. Petersburg, and there's a lot of businesses that have shuttered in West St. Petersburg. The property values seem to be going down a little bit.
A little
It's
bit.
an older generation that is living in those neighborhoods, like around Tyrone Square. But what if we could create some, I don't even like to say affordable housing, some workforce housing
Right.
for
Attainable
those
housing. There's so many
servers.
definitions, but
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
And then on top of that, we had a shuttle, that could take them to work every day, like a sort of like the Sunrunner, but something that's maybe going back and forth with a little more frequency. Then they could get back and forth from work.
And that is
The
some of the hope of the Sunrunner that they
Yeah,
would build along that corridor some attainable
right.
housing but yes, I mean, it's something incremental progress, right?
Yeah,
You can't
yeah,
solve
we
that
got
overnight.
we gotta start and then just keep working on it.
What has surprised you the most going from kind of a newspaper into the nonprofit world?
That I don't know everything. Oh, I just thought
I'll figure that
PR.
out.
I'm a journalist. I can handle PR with one arm tied behind my back. No, it's much more challenging than I ever imagined, and it continues to change. Communications is one of the most dynamic fields in our society
Yeah.
today, with the changes on social media, with this whole challenge of fighting through um, misinformation and multiple channels. Owen, there was a time where you just had newspaper, television, radio.
Yeah.
And that was all you had to worry about.
Yep.
Now it's multiple platforms that you have to try to get your message out to. Our audience has been segmented in so many different ways, and one of the phrases that I've adopted from United Way Worldwide's marketing department is "one message, many doors," and so we're trying to get our message out on an array of platforms, and that's a challenge.
It is a challenge, and it was. I do kind of long for the simpler times where like everybody only got their information from a couple different channels because
Right.
we all were starting from the same place. Like how many
Mhm.
times you're having conversations and kind of going back to our earlier conversation, things you take as facts. There's a completely other side of that someone else has different facts and
Right.
different sources. And
Well, this is one of the byproducts of the influence of newspapers being diminished, is that it has led to us being more divided as a community. When newspapers were prominent, they could write a story about, let's say, a zoning change in your neighborhood. And whether the people in your neighborhood were Democrats or Republicans didn't matter. If they were opposed to that zoning change, they rallied together and politics were set aside to look out for each other. That kind of mobilization isn't happening as much because we have fewer people getting their news from local newspapers. Where are they getting their news from? From cable national networks. And as you know, those outlets are they lean either left or right. So when you have more people getting their news from those sources, it's going to be more polarizing. You're going to have you're widening that political chasm, that political divide, and newspapers were able to bring people together, not just on zoning issues, but on the local sports team or the high school playing for a state championship or the kid from the community who won the spelling bee. Those are all things that we just took pride in
Mhm.
as residents of Tampa Bay, and we're losing some of that, I think.
And just in knowing what's going on in your community. I mean, I had Mike Heltown from The Bone,
Mhm.
and the only reason I knew like AC/DC was coming to town is I flipped through it and he was talking about it one night,
Yep.
and like never saw it anywhere else. And like by the time the tickets come out, it's too late. And I know you're talking about the reading or the spelling champion and whatnot, but
Yeah, no,
those stories get lost.
yeah, it's all important because it unites us, and that's what local radio, local TV, local newspaper does. And if we have fewer people watching and relying on those as sources, we're going to have less unity. I don't think anyone can deny that. We need things to bring us together, and we need communication outlets, media outlets that help create that sense of community and that sense of unity. And whether it's getting together to go see ACDC or coming down to Bay Shore for Gasparilla, I mean, that's still happening, but we need all of those things that remind us of what makes life great here.
Well said. And Ernest, last question. So, I mean, you've been in the weeds in the community for so many years. What would you say Tampa Bay is going to look like in 5 to 10 years from now? What's your prediction?
I think there are some issues on the horizon that have to be solved. The aforementioned affordable workforce housing has to get resolved if we're going to continue to be a destination for folks. I think, we talk a lot about disaster resiliency at United Way and trying to be one of the leaders to get the community to be better prepared, not just for hurricanes, but for all disasters. And that effort needs to continue. So we will continue to be a place um, that people love to live in, and not one where people are in fear of floods and storms and other catastrophes. But if we can get some of those issues resolved, I think the future looks bright for Tampa Bay. When I first moved here, and for many years, everyone talked about Tampa Bay's potential. This place has so much potential. Potential is a dangerous word.
Yes, it is.
Because it sounds complimentary, but what it's really saying is that we're not fulfilling our destiny. And I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, we've really started to fulfill that destiny with the Riverwalk,
Hmm.
with the vibrancy that has come to downtown Tampa and downtown St. Petersburg and other places like Safety Harbor and Dunedin. And
Yeah, great places.
yeah, I wrote about Dunedin one day when I was doing the column, and I was like, "Man, this is like Tampa Bay's hidden jewel. I love this downtown." And somebody from Dunedin said, "Hey, man, don't tell people. So we like it just as it
Yes,
is.
don't come here."
Yeah. Can you stop?" So we are fulfilling that potential, and we just have to keep going and make sure we don't become so enamored with the new shiny objects that we don't solve the issues that are on the horizon.
Anything else you want to share with anybody before our listeners before you leave?
Well, let me say that I'm so thrilled to be at United Way Suncoast. I'm not just saying that. Uh, your wife, our team has shown a lot of faith in me, and I try to wake up every day and reward them and reward the community members we serve because of the faith that they've shown in me. And so I'm very grateful for that. Um, we're doing terrific work. We recently um, announced that we're going to have $14.1 million in grants going out to 67 nonprofit partners over the next 3 years.
Amazing.
It's huge. And what's even bigger about that is one of my favorite factoids. Got it from our data team. Got to give them credit. But for every dollar we invest with our nonprofit partners, the community realizes a return of $2.75.
That's incredible impact.
Yeah, I think that's a number a banker can appreciate.
Absolutely. That's good return.
So it's great return, and we're going to keep that going. We're going to try to make that number even bigger. And we use the expertise that comes from 101 years of being a nonprofit to help our nonprofit partners. And it's why we are able to maximize those dollars. It's, I don't want to suggest that you don't donate to your local nonprofits, but also recognize that a thriving United Way benefits those nonprofit partners because we're helping them do a better job and be more effective and efficient. We recognize we can't do it all, but at the same time, we can help our nonprofit partners have a greater impact.
I love it. If people want to reach out to you or want to support the United Way, how would you recommend they do that?
I would say just go to our website, unitedwaysuncoast.org. If you want to reach me, you can email me at ehooper@uwsuncoast.org. Would love to hear from folks who are interested, not just in donating, but in volunteering and finding other ways to help with our mission of collective impact.
Ernest, I want to thank you not only for coming on the show, but just your impact that you've had in the community, the impact that you continue to have at United Way. So thank you for everything you do, man.
No, and I appreciate you having me, Owen, and all the support you've lent over the years. I was sincere. I really appreciate that. I'll always remember it.
No, it's a pleasure. Ernest Hooper, thanks for coming on Money Market.
All right. Thanks for having me.
You can find the Money Market Podcast and the Bank of Tampa online at LinkedIn, X, Facebook, and Instagram. Before you leave, make sure you hit that like, follow, or subscribe button, and we'll be sure to see you around in the Money Market.